In this century, great strides have been made toward the goal of subverting our republic into a democracy. The foremost tactic of the subverters is subversion of language. By calling America a democracy until people thoughtlessly accept and use the term, the totalitarians have obscured the real meaning of our principles of government. That is a summary of my report on a constitutional republic, not a democracy.
Welcome back to Notify America. We have multiple pressing stories to get to, stories that include a troubling situation out of Canada, the heavy hand of the Canadian government after the way that we saw the trucking protesters handled last year. Well, the overreach apparently hasn't stopped, as we now have a video showing one of the few independent media outlets left in Canada, the big ones at least, that actually asks tough questions to the Trudeau government. Well, they had one of their reporters arrested while trying to fairly ask a question to the Deputy Prime Minister. Luckily, we have the footage as they're charging him with assault, a serious crime in Canada, a serious crime anywhere, crime that can carry prison time. We also look at what happened at a Brooklyn, New York synagogue last night. Very odd story. We have the details. Also, Elon Musk decides to ban the official Hamas X account, and more stories from around the nation. But before we get started, press the like button, subscribe, share the video with a friend. All of that helps out to get this content out there to more people, to get the video and the channel out there to more people. Our neighbor to the north, under the Trudeau government, had something happen yesterday, a run-in with a reporter that harkens back to a few years ago, the heavy hand of the government during the pandemic. Well, here in America, the First Amendment, freedom of the press, is important, foundational, at least it should be. We're having our own issues right now with that kind of thing as well, including what they're doing to Julian Assange. But this story is disturbing enough to highlight on today's broadcast, as we first saw this type of thing play out 2 years ago during the trucker convoy, where for 23 days, starting in late January, normal, everyday Canadians began to protest. Working class people, primarily truck drivers, gathered in downtown Ottawa to make their voices heard. Sick and tired of the social restrictions and mandates that the Trudeau government was implementing. Remember this?
And we want to be free Canadians.
Increasing concern spreading through Canada and now the U.S. as the Freedom Convoy threatens trade along the border. Truckers blocking traffic at the Ambassador Bridge connecting Detroit and Ontario. A second crossing linking Alberta and Montana also shut down by protesters, calling for an end to all COVID restrictions and vaccine mandates.
We want freedom of all mandates, and that's what we're fighting for.
The Ambassador Bridge is the busiest international crossing in North America, carrying 25% of all trade between Canada and the U.S.
Many of the trucks were decorated with Canadian flags and passages from their Constitution. Normal, everyday, working class Canadians looking to make their voices heard in what they assumed was their right. But then things took an odd and dark turn. Supporters of the Freedom Convoy began to have their donations seized by the government. Protesters began to be rounded up and arrested, and anyone who was caught providing financial support, i.e. donations to the protesters, would have their bank accounts and funds frozen by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government. He was able to do this after taking the extraordinary step of invoking temporary emergency powers, a tool that lawmakers gave the Prime Minister 40 years ago as a means of last resort. In the event that a dire emergency were to happen, the leader of the country has the ability to invoke emergency powers in order to help and protect the Canadian people. Well, Justin Trudeau, for the first time in Canada's history, invoked these emergency powers. Watch this.
After discussing with Cabinet and caucus, after consultation with premiers from all provinces and territories, after speaking with opposition leaders, the federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupation.
According to Reuters, by doing this, it gave police additional power to remove and arrest protesters, allowed the government to freeze assets of those suspected of funding the blockades, and allowed for the commandeering of tow trucks. Now, after the Emergencies Act was invoked 2 years ago, the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada Chrystia Freeland held a press conference where she explains how the government will begin to freeze your assets if you donate to the protesters. Watch this.
The government is issuing an order with immediate effect under the Emergencies Act, authorizing Canadian financial institutions to temporarily cease providing financial services where the institution suspects that an account is being used to further the illegal blockades and occupations. This order covers both personal and corporate accounts. Third, we are directing Canadian financial institutions to review their relationships with anyone involved in the illegal blockades and report to the RCMP or CSIS. As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
Well, that was almost 2 years ago, but the impulse here of authoritarianism appears to live on, as a reporter yesterday from Rebel News, one of the only media outlets in Canada who doesn't toe the party line, was arrested after trying to fairly ask a question to the Deputy Prime Minister, arrested for assault after a member of her security detail bumps into the reporter. Watch.
Ms. Freeland, how come the IRGC is not a terrorist group? Why is your government supporting Islamo-nationalism? What? Excuse me. What are you doing?
You're under arrest for assault.
Sir,
why are you pushing me? You're under arrest for assault.
Who are you?
You're under arrest for assault.
What are you talking about? Police, you're under arrest for assault. How am I under arrest? You bumped into me.
You pushed into me.
You bumped. I was just scrubbing. I got my credentials here, and you just bumped into me. So excuse
Police,
me.
You're under arrest.
What is your name and your badge? What is your name and your badge?
You've been told you're under arrest.
Why am I under arrest? He blocked my way. What? I was just scrumming Chrystia Freeland.
I'm a police officer. You're under arrest.
What is your name and your badge?
Assaulting a police officer.
How is that possible?
Okay.
Come on. This is clearly not assault. That Secret Service agent, or whatever they call it in Canada, clearly lost his cool, and we're lucky to have the footage of what happened, because being arrested for assault is a serious charge, a charge that carries prison time. But the part that's astonishing is how the Deputy Prime Minister just continues walking away. Doesn't pull her guard off and de-escalate the situation, doesn't recognize that this is a reporter trying to ask a question. Or maybe she does recognize that, but finds it acceptable because he's a Rebel News reporter? I don't know. I don't know what she was thinking. What's even stranger is that other media outlets don't seem to be upset about this. Normally, journalists will take each other's backs, even if they are, ideologically opposed, but nobody in mainstream Canadian media is outraged by this or asking questions to the Trudeau government about why a reporter would be arrested for asking a question and being bumped into by a security guard. Justin Trudeau, by the way, he's been in power since 2015, and unlike the US, doesn't have a fixed term. The Prime Minister serves at the Majesty's pleasure and remains in office until they either step down, are dismissed, or pass on. In another story, Elon Musk decides to ban the official Hamas X account, saying Hamas is not recognized as a government by the UN, so was suspended, saying it was a tough call. Let me know in the comments if you think it was the right decision. As people who don't like Elon are saying he's a hypocrite for banning this account when he claims to be a free speech absolutist. But that the same people who are saying that would yell if he didn't suspend the account, saying he allows violent footage from a terrorist organization on his platform. Sometimes you just can't win, I suppose. In another bizarre story out of Brooklyn, New York, secret tunnels were discovered under a synagogue. And when crews arrived to fill the tunnels in, members of the synagogue began to block the workers. This story is very convoluted at the moment. It's hard to tell why the synagogue had these secret tunnels in the first place, why they were being built. We do know that the tunnels were first discovered in December and led to a nearby bathhouse that's no longer being used. The Daily Mail says the tunnels were dug by Orthodox Jewish men in an attempt to link the building to a nearby ritual bathhouse. So far, 10 people were arrested after a riot broke out in the synagogue last night. the Alaska Airlines flight that made an emergency landing at Portland International Airport Sunday following its door ripping off the fuselage, which triggered a sudden decompression event to occur. We covered that a few videos ago. Well, NTSB says the data from the cockpit flight recorder won't be retrieved because the data was erased. They say it was completely overwritten. There was no data when they went to review it. Apparently, U.S. cockpit recorders are only required to log 2 hours of data versus 25 hours for European aircrafts. All right, that wraps up this episode. Press the like button, subscribe. We'll see you next time.